I love today's topic. Thanks for joining us on our little education series. But today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things, which is Roth conversions. Learn how to supercharge your tax-free wealth. Honestly, I don't think there's anything that is more important than understanding Roth IRAs and how they work in today's wealth building. It's such an important tool that everybody should have this knowledge and use it, even if they're not self-directing. It's just super important information for everybody. Disclaimer: Quest doesn't provide tax, legal, or investment advice. This is for education purposes only. It's to give you the education to make your own decision, but always look and consider tax attorneys and your CPAs and financial advisors before entering any type of investment or doing anything. And always know how to do due diligence on self-directed investments. That's so important. But remember, the way Quest makes money is to charge transaction fees when you do transactions. And we're legally obligated to process those transactions as long as they're not obviously prohibited or something, invested correctly and those type of things. So it's really important that you take your own time to understand what to do with an investment when it goes wrong and work from there. So a little basic information before I get into the Roth conversion. I think it helps. I know I repeat myself a lot on these education classes about the basic information. And if anything in these first slides or whatever seems like you need a little more information, it's because I'm going fast for them to get to the other part. Go back to some of the other presentations where you'll see we slow down a little bit on it. But a self-directed IRA really isn't a type of IRA at all, right? We just hold private assets versus other custodians hold publicly traded assets. And so a lot of people get confused, like a self-directed IRA is a type of IRA, and it's really not. It just describes what we do. There's all types of IRAs that can be self-directed. And most of my clients will hold an account both at someone like Charles Schwab, maybe someone like Quest or something like that. In other words, they don't diminish their relationship with their current financial advisor, because what they're doing is they're still doing them to do their normal investing. They're using Quest to do their unusual investing, and we're transferring back and forth. And as long as we do this correctly, where it's an IRA to an IRA custodian, we can transfer as many times a year as we want, right? There's tons of benefits of having a self-directed account. Right, allows you to diversify into other things, especially real estate. One of my favorite things to talk about, and real estate notes and all of those things that go along with investing in real estate, right? But anytime that you're building wealth, you need to spend time working on your tax programs of building that wealth. And IRAs are an intricate part of building wealth, both for now and generational, especially Roth IRAs. So we'll talk a little bit about that, right? And I think that there's a lot of benefits socially to having self-directed accounts, because you understand where your money's being invested. Often it's being invested locally to create local jobs, or to fix up something that may be a blight in your community. But as always, you're allowed to invest in things that you may know and understand, and therefore you tend to have a higher profit margins because you're invested in the things that you know and know how to do. If a self-directed IRA isn't a type of IRA, well, what types of IRAs can be self-directed? Well, there's all types, right? We're going to be talking a lot today about the Roth IRA, or traditional to Roth IRA, right? And doing that conversion from our traditional funds or our tax deferred funds into our Roth IRA, which will grow tax-free. But there's also employer plans that can be self-directed, like SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, or a very powerful tool called the solo 401k, or also be titled an individual 401k. But then there's specialty plans too, health savings accounts. People have never thought about buying a piece of property in a health savings account, and it's one of the most amazing things that you can do. Coverdell education accounts. I've got classes on all of those on our websites that you can learn a little bit more about those different types of plans things. But all of those can be self-directed, and you can also partner them together, even if those people are disqualified persons to each other. For example, all the time. In my house, I might partner my IRA with my wife's IRA, and we loan that out and do a loan, and maybe our son is partnered on with that our IRA, or my mother. Well, all those people are disqualified persons to doing with my IRA. But as long as the money comes back, it comes back in exactly split up to the percentages of the ownership, then that money will come back evenly to each of those different accounts. Quest, our systems will do that automatically. So if you have a loan with 5 different IRAs in it, and some own 10%, another one owns 22.5%, as a payment comes in, it'll allow it to kind of split between those different assets. And I think that's really cool because it allows you to take like your kid's small IRA or some of these other things and partner them together, and it makes it a family event. I talk a lot about that, and it also helps to build the generational wealth because people are investing together. All right. Again, I kind of alluded to that. There are restrictions on all of these types of accounts, and the restrictions are pretty serious. There are people restrictions, transaction restrictions, and investment restrictions, right? The one that concerns us most comes to the people restrictions. There are people that are called disqualified persons that are not qualified to do business with the IRA. They can't buy, sell, trade, loan, or extend services or receive a benefit directly or indirectly. Who are these people, you may ask? Well, yes, that is you. You're a disqualified person to your IRA. You see, the reason they do this is they don't want you to do any business with the IRA. Your IRA is for a future, right? In other words, your benefit is when you take that money out to buy something cool when you retire. In the meantime, you can bring to bear all of your knowledge and skills to try to make that account grow, but you can't benefit from it. So if the IRA bought a house, you couldn't live in that house, right? So, and all the money that the house got in rents would go back to the IRA, and all the money that came out would come out of the IRA. So you treat your money completely separately from your IRA's money. You tell it what to invest in, you can tell it what to do, okay? But that's an investing for the future. You use what I call other people's IRAs to invest for now. Watch some of my lending classes and stuff like that to get a little bit of information on those. But disqualified people can't buy, sell, trade, loan, or extend services or receive a benefit directly or indirectly. And who else is disqualified? Well, there's a group of people who are equally disqualified to the IRA. And that includes yourself, your spouse, your children and parents, their spouses, and the kicker here, companies that those people would own, control, manage, or considered highly compensated employees thereof, right? So what is it again? That just leads us into the prohibited transactions, and it's kind of funny. We already talked about it. It's just the things that the people can't do. They can't buy, sell, loan, extend services, which includes things like credit, or receive a benefit either directly or indirectly. All right. There are some actual restrictions on the investments themselves, which is life insurance contracts and collectibles. And collectibles are specifically defined as artworks, rugs, antiques, metals, gems, or, yes, ladies and gentlemen, alcoholic beverage collections are prohibited inside IRA. Again, most of that stuff doesn't get us. If you understand the people, right, and what the people can't do, then we understand what we can do, and we can learn how to be good deal architects that way. What are some of the investment choices you can do with your self-directed IRA? Anything that you could take title to, right? Well, commonly we see a lot of real estate. And at Quest, we kind of break it down into 3 different departments. We have a real estate department because purchasing real estate is a little bit different than like purchasing into a subscription agreement for an apartment complex or doing a note. So we see direct purchase of real estate. We see people invest into private entities like LLCs and joint ventures and trust and all of those types of things, limited partnerships. And then we see a lot of people that do direct lending. I do a lot of this where I'm, lending on a house here in Texas that's secured by a first lien mortgage with a note and deed of trust. We see all types of first lien, second lien, even see unsecured notes. It drives me crazy, but I see people that do that. All right. All types of things. So we have a notes department that process there. But basically anything you can take title to, you can own in a self-directed IRA. So when we're talking about retirement account funds and you're thinking about them, there are really two types of money, right? Those that grow tax deferred. In other words, when we put them into our money bucket, we've received them in a tax deduction when we put them in. So we have never paid our tax on that money that goes in that bucket. When we will pay the tax is when we take it out and we're above the age of 59 and a half, and it'll add into our modified adjusted growth income at that age. All right. This is the typical retirement money. The one we're here to talk about today is a Roth IRA. Roth IRAs are completely opposite. With a Roth IRA, you pay your tax today. In other words, the money that goes into the bucket is taxable money. You have paid your income tax on it. But as it grows, and as long as you've met the requirements for it to be a qualified distribution, when you remove that, right, it comes out tax-free, including all the growth that could have occurred. A Roth IRA is an amazing account for many, many reasons. I don't know of a wealth building guru in the United States that does not teach about the powers of the Roth IRA. And so often as us investors, we get so involved, we think, well, which one of these buckets is really most important to us? And I have to point out to you that the one that really is the most important would be that we start our thinking with the traditional IRA or the tax deferred bucket. And everyone goes, well, why? The Roth's so cool. Well, you have to start your thinking with the traditional IRA bucket because that's where most people's money is. You see, most people got their money in the retirement account by going to work and figured out they can get some free money. They put some money into an account, right? They get a tax deduction. Their employer gets a tax deduction. And so, if they put money in, the employer's matching, it's getting there and gets to be a big old bucket of money over a period of years, right? But what's wrong with the big giant bucket of money? It's got a problem that we've never paid tax on it. Every time we reach your hands in to take some out, what happens? You got Uncle Sam going there like, hey, man, what's in your bucket, right? Can I have it? Can I have it? Right? Some of that bucket belongs to Uncle Sam. Matter of fact, most people that do investments, even at Quest, self-directed investments, do the investments through their traditional IRA. Most of them do not do what I'm talking about today, which is doing a Roth conversion. There has been tax change laws that now allow anybody at any income level to convert this traditional IRA money, this bucket of taxable money, we can pour it into our Roth IRA bucket. And we could do it at any age. We could do it at any income level. And there are no penalties associated for doing this. What is it I miss, ladies and gentlemen? What we missed is taxation. As we convert from the traditional to the Roth IRA, it will add taxation to the modified adjusted growth income in the year in which the conversion occurred. So if you have a great big old bucket of retirement funds and you move it all over to the Roth IRA, what happens is in the year that occurs, it will generate from your custodian, me, a 1099 saying that you received all that money. Now you have to pay income tax on it, though you've not received any of it at all, So, whoa, that if you're already making money, that could add into it. It could be pretty onerous. So let's look into a Roth IRA and understand a little bit why they're so important and why we would have one. Well, first of all, again, it grows completely tax-free. So if you've got the ability to take a little bit of money and make it into a whole bunch of money, don't you want to do that in an account that you don't have to pay tax on it? And the answer is, of course, if you could do that. That's the magic thing. The problem with Roth IRAs is they've had very limited use up until now. The contribution limits have been very small. They've been expanded recently, but even today, it's only $6,000, right? You get $1,000 extra if you're over the age of 50. Okay, but it's subject to income limits. In other words, if you make too much money, you're not allowed to make that contribution there. The contribution rules is not what changed in 2010. The reason why we say at Quest that anybody can have a Roth IRA is because you could make it, no matter whether you had income, too much income or not, you're allowed to make a contribution into a traditional IRA. It may not be deductible, but that's okay. We can immediately convert that over to a Roth IRA because the conversion, so everybody could actually make Roth IRA contributions. That's why we say that. But these are subject to limit, and those limits and the small amounts have kept the Roth IRAs pretty small, and the other ones are pretty big, right? Roth IRAs are really pretty cool. Senator Roth thought about a lot of things. For example, you can contribute to it all the way up to the tax filing deadline, not to include extensions, but the tax filing deadline. So typically April 15th, right? You've got all the way until the next year to be able to make that contribution. Okay. If you and your spouse, if one of you works, you can make a Roth IRA contribution to both you and your spouse's things, right? Qualified distributions from Roth IRAs are tax-free forever. Qualified means typically that you've reached the age of either 59 and a half and have had a Roth IRA for 5 tax years. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody should start the Roth IRA, even if it's very little, just to get it going to burn off those 5 tax years. And if you have a Roth 401k at work, make sure you're running a Roth IRA in tandem with it so that when you do pull it out of that 401k at work, that it rolls into a Roth IRA that is already seasoned past its 5 years. So some little bit of extra information. If you have questions about that, just call one of our IRA specialists. Remember, it's absolutely free to speak to an IRA specialist, whether you're a client or not at Quest. All right. One of the other things is with Roth IRAs over the other type of account, like a traditional IRA, once you reach a certain age with a traditional IRA, you have what we call required minimum distributions. You have to start taking money out of that account, and it gets a little bit more each and every year. Right? With Roth IRAs, you don't have required minimum distributions. You can leave it in and you don't have to take it out. And for that reason, it's often used to help create a way of passing on wealth to our heirs. Now, recently there has been changes. It used to be whenever you would die, you could give that Roth IRA to your children and it could grow tax-free for the rest of their lives. It's kind of changed now. You can still pass this on completely tax-free to your children, but they have 10 years, and at the end of the 10 years, they have to distribute that. Your wife can't take it on as her own like she's always been able to do, and then give it, or your spouse, I should say, if one of you had predeceased the other. So the whole point is 10 years is a long time for the account to continue to grow tax-free. And if you think about it, they take your age, and if I did a Roth conversion today, it would grow tax-free for now, right, until the day I die, plus 10 more years after that. That's how long it grows tax-free, which, depending on your age and depending on when you die, can be a long, long time. But let's look at why so many people don't do it, right? Look, Joe's employed at the factory. He's worked there about 20 years, okay? He's built up a decent amount of retirement. Okay, but he's not a real estate investor. He's just an average guy, right? He can do a Roth conversion, but if he does a Roth conversion, what happens? Well, it adds to his modified adjusted growth income. And he's probably already still working. A lot of Americans are working later, so he already has some income. And what would happen is with Joe, if he does that, let's say he's already making money, making a couple $100,000, what we call the marginal tax rate, or what he's going to have to pay tax on that conversion, could be very, very high because we're adding all this income on top of it. So he could be paying all the way up to 39.6% tax on this conversion, depending on how much he's making currently and what he makes. But most assuredly, he's in one of the higher tax brackets once he does that. So a huge portion of the amount needed to do the Roth conversion would go away, and because the cost of it would have to go to Uncle Sam. We'd have to pay so much in tax, it would just eat away. And for a lot of Americans, that's not a very good choice, because if we take our retirement account, and as we reach retirement age, we're told that we have to keep it safe, right? And because we can't work 20 more years, so we got to keep it safe. So that usually means investments that have very low returns with our retirement accounts, and as a result, a Roth conversion may not make sense, because it could take so long to make up that taxation, especially if we get very low returns. And that's the reason why a lot of people, when they go to talk to their financial planners, don't do Roth conversions. But good news, we are not average. Dun, dun, dun. We're real estate investors. For real, the ability to take the money and get a secured return, or get a good return at higher rates using all the different real estate strategies everyone talks about and all the ones we talk about, and doing it in a Roth IRA, changes the game. As soon as you start making more money faster, it changes how you have to look and whether or not you should do a Roth conversion. It's certainly very serious thing to consider, and you want to make sure you are making the right decisions. So these are the things I think that you should think about if you want to do a Roth conversion, okay? Because everyone's situation is a little differently, and this is also when I encourage you to maybe sit down with an IRA specialist on the phone and get some information about that, so that you're on the things to do, right? Some of the things you want to think about is, if you do the Roth conversion, what is your assumption about tax laws and tax rates generally in the future, right? Are they going up? Most people tend to think so, but whatever. Are they going up or down? Some of those different things, right? But it's a big one is, are you in a lower or higher tax bracket in the year that you do that conversion? For example, if you're making a whole bunch of money this year and you don't intend to make very much money next year because you're going to retire, maybe the following year would be a better year to do a conversion. So that tax bracket has to be kind of considered in there, okay? One of the big things that I think that people don't even think about is they'll go through this huge analysis about whether they should do Roth conversions, and they forget one of the really important parts to the whole thought process is, can you afford to pay the taxes? Because let me explain to you what happens is, you don't pay the tax out of the Roth IRA or out of the money that's in there. You pay the tax out of the HIP National, right out of the wallet. In other words, you get a 1099 that you have to add all that income onto your tax return, and you pay your taxes there. And so that could be a hard hit. If you can't afford to pay those taxes, that might be the question that you're asking. How much I can actually afford to pay will tell me how much I can afford to convert. Does that make sense? So sometimes you got to look at it both ways. For me, to me, when I was going through Roth, I've managed to convert most of my retirement funds at this point. But as I was going through the conversion, I did it over a period of years, so I didn't get all the taxation in 1 year. So I could afford to pay it, because I couldn't afford to pay it all in 1 year, and also it helped keep me in lower tax brackets. So there are some strategies and some things that you want to think about as to how you have to pay it, which years you would be in a lower or higher tax bracket, and different things. Consider, will it change your marginal tax bracket? Maybe this may change Social Security or Medicare. Try to figure out in your head how much it's going to cost to do Roth conversion. You may not have all the facts up front, but you got to try to get them. You got to kind of try to extrapolate, well, what is my tax situation? If it's January and you're doing a Roth conversion, and there may be some very big advantages to doing it in January, we'll see in a minute. You may not know what you're going to be, what your tax rate is or whatever. You're going to have to just take a guess at it, right? Other things. Do you want to leave tax-free wealth to your heirs? Like, some people do, some people don't. I will tell you, I've been trying to convince my mom to do a Roth conversion for years, and she looks at me and she says, oh, all my boys make good money. Why would I pay their taxes for them? So she says, I'm just leaving that there for you guys anyway. But anyway, I've not been able to convince her. So, but it's just something to think about. Maybe you don't have people that you're wanting to leave tax-free, so that a tax deferred things. But I think the biggest thing that should determine what you're going to do with the Roth conversion is what are the projected gains? How much you're making on the investment. Definitely, if you go to the ridiculous, I'm going to take $1 and I'm going to invest in a widget, and tomorrow it's going to be worth $1 million. Everyone got it? Well, wouldn't you pay tax on the $1 versus the 1 million? The answer is of course. I'd do a Roth conversion on the $1, and then I'd have $1 million of my tax free, right? So somewhere in there, how much money I'm making is the answer as to whether you should do a Roth conversion. Okay. So what I like to do is calculate the entire cost of what I think that it's going to cost to do the to pay in taxes, everything, right? And then I look at my investment and see how long it's going to take to get the money back, right? If I don't need that money and I can afford to make that, then it usually makes sense for me to do that. Okay. It's almost like looking at, if you've ever done that analysis, should I refinance my mortgage? Okay, the interest rates are down. Yes, my interest rates may go down, but it may cost so much more to refinance. If I'm going to sell it in 6 months, I don't want to do that. I've got to stay in the house long enough for that to make sense. The same way here. And we'll tie this in with some stories in just a second that will help. Okay. I thought if I made too much money to do a Roth conversion, again, 2010, they removed that rule. So yes, it's true, you can't make that contribution, but anybody can do a Roth conversion. And again, no penalties at all. So here's a little story to tell you, and maybe this will help you make sense. This happened a while ago, but in February, a guy converted $12,000. He estimated that he would have to pay $3,300 in taxes. Everyone follow that. Now, he did this in February. He purchased a mobile home. It was a mobile home and a piece of real estate. Purchased it for cash for $11,000. And he was able to turn around and sell that fairly quickly, several months later, for $25,000. Plus, he carried a little note for $5,000, so he actually got $30,000 for a total profit on the mobile home deal of $18,000. Now go back up to the $3,300. When does he have to actually pay that tax? You see, he knew he had a good deal in this mobile home, so he had a thought process. I could do this deal outside my IRAs and I make good money, but I'm going to have to pay tax on it. I could do it in my traditional IRA and I make good money, but someday down the road I'd have to pay tax on it. Or I could choose to pay my tax now and make good money on it. And now instead of having $12,000 in his Roth IRA, he has $30,000 in his Roth IRA, which is much easier to invest in. And back to the original question, when does he have to pay that tax? Well, not until April of the following year. So think about it. If I'm a flipper, I'm buying houses and flipping property, I could probably flip a property in a year. And even if I did have to remove money from the Roth IRA to pay the taxes, then the Roth IRA would be converted and it could grow tax-free for the rest of my life plus an additional 10 years. So it could be pretty good. Now, there is something I want to talk about. It used to be when I would do my Roth conversions, what I would like to do is I might do 2 or 3 conversions in 1 year of different amounts. And I would convert the exact amount that needed to do that investment. And then I'd watch them. And I had all the way until tax filing deadlines plus extensions, October the following year, to make the decision as if I wanted to keep it a Roth IRA. So if I had one of those investments that didn't do very well, oops, went way down, or one did a lot better than the others, I could, what we call recharacterize or unconvert. I could make the conversion go away and just, act like it never happened. They took that away from us, ladies and gentlemen, and there's some of that information that's still out there. So I'm trying to get it out. If you do a Roth conversion these days, once you've done it, it's done. There is no going back like there used to be. So that, I'm just going to say, you have to be really bullish on your investment, because it is done. It's done. There's no call and quest or anyone else to make it go backwards after that happens. So it is important to understand that you do not have to convert all of your money. I've alluded to this several different times, that doing a partial conversion may be very helpful, either by spreading out the taxes, but also, what is the real magic in a Roth IRA? The magic is the investment. If the investment is doing well, then that works. So you shouldn't convert just a chunk of it. Again, just convert what you need to do a particular investment that you think is going to go well. Save the rest for other times, and and do the conversion later. Okay. And again, I get asked all the time, well, I've already got assets in my Roth IRA. It's not in cash. Can I do a conversion of an asset, an actual, like I own a house inside my IRA? Can I convert that? Yes, we can convert assets. You can even convert half the house from your traditional to your Roth IRA. But when we do that, we have to get what's called a fair market value hard appraisal. What we mean by that is, every year we ask for fair market values on all of your accounts, and you must provide us some information on it. We need a little information and some documentation. For example, if it's a piece of real estate, often people might use the tax rolls to show us what the property may be worth, and a little letter of explanation as to whether they felt that the property went up or down in value and to why. So it's very what we call a soft value. Why is it soft? Because it's just sitting in the account. It's not being reported taxes. We got to have an idea what it's worth. There has to be some documentation, but it doesn't have to be firm documentation. As soon as I create a taxable event, I'm distributing a house from my IRA and then putting it into my traditional IRA, right? I'm rolling it over into my traditional IRA. That distribution is a taxable event, and we can't be willy-nilly about what it's worth. So it has to be a hard appraisal. For example, if I do a conversion of a piece of real estate, I have to get an actual appraiser to go out there and look at it. If I'm going to flip over something like a note, if it's a discounted note, I'm going to have to get a note appraisal. If it's a note where the value is the face value of the note, maybe you're acting like a hard money lender and you just did a fresh note to somebody that's doing a flip or something like that. In those cases, you can use the face value, because that's, it's intrinsic, we can use the face value of the note. And then LLCs, we're going to have to get, and those that can become very complicated on getting the proper valuation. But we'll work with you to get through each and out in those different scenarios to come up with. But the question is you can't just pretend like it's not worth very much and do a Roth conversion. We're going to have some pretty significant paperwork in order to be able to do that. The real truth is as you're looking at things, is if I'm growing a money tree, I'm going to start with an acorn, right? And the whole idea is you pay the tax on the acorn until it grows into the mighty money tree. And most of your money is going to grow, right? And it's hard to think about that far into the future, but it is a cornerstone of wealth building, and I think it's a cornerstone of generational wealth building, to learn how to pass wealth on to Roth IRAs, but more importantly, learn how to pass the knowledge about how to invest with your children and your grandchildren. Nothing will provide them with a better future, and it's not an education they're really getting anywhere else. Guys, I hope these have been helpful for you. They're really fun for me, and I love bringing all the little facts and the things that have meant so much to me and my family. I hope that their ultimate goal is a giant pile of tax-free gold at retirement, and hopefully we can help you to get there. As we go through these different concepts, don't be frightened to pick up the phone and talk to an IRA specialist. Again, it's always free of cost. You don't have to be a client. You can be a client with one of my competitors. We don't care. We know that if we can win you over with good customer service and good education, you'll be our clients sooner or later. So if you ever have any questions, just IRA specialist at trustquestioning.com. Thanks again, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little segment of our series.